صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا. إنا خلقنا الإنسان من نطفة أمشاج نبتليه فجعلناه سميعا بصيرا. إنا هديناه السبيل إما شاكرا وإما كفورا. إنا أعتدنا للكافرين سلاسل وأغلالا وسعيرا. إن الأبرار يشربون من كأس كان مزاجها كافورا. عينا يشرب بها عباد الله يفجرونها تفجيرا. يوفون بالنذر ويخافون يوما كان شره مستطيرا. ويطعمون الطعام على حبه مسكينا ويتيما وأسيرا. إنما نطعمكم لوجه الله إنما نطعمكم لوجه الله لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا. إنا نخاف من ربنا يوما عبوسا قمطريرا. فوقاهم الله شر ذلك اليوم ولقاهم نضرة وسرورا. وجزاهم بما صبروا جنة وحريرا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Beneficent. Has there not been over man a long period of time when he was nothing, not even mentioned? Verily, we created man from a drop of mingled sperm in order to try him. So we gave him the gifts of hearing and sight. We showed him the way, whether he be grateful or ungrateful, rests on his will. For the rejectors we have prepared chains, yokes, and a blazing fire. And as to the righteous, they shall drink of a cup of wine mixed with kafur, a fountain where the devotees of Allah do drink, making it flow in unstinted abundance. They perform their vows and they fear days whose evil flies far and wide, and they feed for the love of Allah the indigent, the orphan, and the captive, saying, we feed you for the sake of Allah alone. No reward do we desire from you, nor thanks. We only fear a day of distressful wrath from the side of our Lord. But Allah will deliver them from the evil of that day, and will shed over them a light of beauty and blissful joy. And because they were patient and constant, He will reward them with a garden and garments of silk. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, please recite أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ, for all people who are unwell, whether in our near circles or in our far circles. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّنْ
يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ
أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ
وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ
أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بار دیگر صلوات. بار دیگر صلوات. Unique are your sacrifices, Zainab and Hussain.
Unique are your sacrifices, Zainab and Hussain.
O glorious progeny of Ahmad Ismail.
O glorious progeny of Ahmad Ismail.
You taught us that only before God we should kneel.
You taught us that only before God we should kneel.
That only if we feel the pain of others can we heal.
That only if we feel the pain of others can we heal.
The world needs your message of Tawheed and love again.
Unique are your sacrifices, Zainab and Hussain.
Everyone.
Unique are your sacrifices, Zainab and
One more
Hussain.
time.
Unique are your sacrifices, Zainab and Hussain.
To never surrender our freedom before tyranny.
To never surrender our freedom before tyranny.
To love mothers and daughters and defeat misogyny.
To love mothers and daughters and defeat misogyny.
With honor and righteousness fight every felony.
With honor and righteousness fight every felony.
Enlightened inspiration from your model can we gain.
Unique are your sacrifices, Zainab and Hussain. Unique are your sacrifices, Zainab and Hussain. Unique are your sacrifices, Zainab and Hussain.
With liars and hypocrites you spoke with honesty.
With liars and hypocrites you spoke with honesty.
To inhuman savages you preached humanity.
To inhuman savages you preached humanity.
Responded to crudeness with sensitivity.
Responded to crudeness with sensitivity.
Your life in this world was like in a desert rain.
Unique are your sacrifices, Zainab and Hussain. Unique are your sacrifices, Zainab and Hussain. Unique are your sacrifices, Zainab and Hussain.
Your method so discreet, your purpose reform.
Your method so discreet, your purpose reform.
To free the soul of Deen from hypocritical form.
To free the soul of Deen from hypocritical form.
Resisting those who wish to make exploitation a norm.
Resisting those who wish to make exploitation a norm.
And for these high ideals you would suffer any pain.
Unique are your sacrifices, Zainab and Hussain. Unique are your sacrifices, Zainab and Hussain.
Everyone.
Unique are your sacrifices, Zainab and Hussain.
You represented Allah's every prophet's legacy.
You represented Allah's every prophet's legacy.
Inherited the purity of Fatima Ali.
Inherited the purity of Fatima Ali.
But did the Ummah value these pillars of piety?
But did the Ummah value these pillars of piety?
They massacred one and paraded the other in chains.
Unique are your sacrifices, Zainab and Hussain. Unique are your sacrifices, Zainab and Hussain. Unique are your sacrifices, Zainab and Hussain.
Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, a few announcements. The tabarruk for today's majlis has been contributed by family of Brother Ali Hashim, and he has requested that we recite Suratul Fatiha for the marhumin and marhumat of their family, namely Sayyid Shafqat Ali, Farasit Jabin, Yusuf Shirazi, Nazir Begum, Mansoor Jaffri, Shaheen Rizvi, and Ali Raza. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. As you know, mu'mineen and mu'minat, those of you who are here and those of you who are joining us live on YouTube, we have the honor of having among us Hujjatul Islam, Moulana Syed Ali Aqib Jaffry. Moulana Jaffry has completed his Masters in Islamic Studies, Islamic Sciences and Fiqh from Qom and is now a student of Dars-e Kharij, which is the highest level of education delivered in our Hawza Ilmiya. Moulana Ali Aqib Jaffry is also an engineer. He completed his engineering degree from the University of Engineering and Technology with top honors and completed his Masters from the University of Washington in Seattle in the US. Moulana Ali Aqib Jaffry will be here in Lahore for another 3 weeks. If there are mu'mineen and mu'minat who wish to organize majalis in English for the youth especially, including with questions and answer sessions, you are welcome to contact him after the majlis. A loud salawat for the siha of Moulana Syed Ali Aqib Jaffry. Allah Muhammad. Moulana Ali Aqib Jaffry has also authored or translated and adapted books for children in English under the names of Heroes of Karbala. There are 20 covered 20 heroes up till now, and some of the books are available today if you are interested to secure them for your children. And another series, The Milky Way, in which he has produced one volume on the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And on Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam. So if you are interested, you can procure these outside. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. As you know, mu'mineen and mu'minat, the title, the topic of these majalis has been Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam, a manifestation of the Holy Quran. And today is the 8th in this series of 9 majalis on this topic. During the course of these majalis, Moulana Jaffry has alerted us to those imperatives of deen which motivated Imam Hussain to initiate his movement and which continue to be a guiding light for those of us who call ourselves the Shia, the followers of Imam Hussain. Most notable among them is Amr bil Ma'ruf and the supremacy of the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Continuing his thought-provoking discussion, presentation in these majalis, I now request Hujjatul Islam, Moulana Syed Ali Aqib Jaffry, to take the minbar and illuminate us with his words. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وخاتم النبيين سيدنا ونبينا وشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب قلوبنا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الغر الميامين المعصومين من يومنا هذا إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وخطابه المتين، وهو أصدق القائلين وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن هذا القرآن يهدي للتي هي أقوم. صلوات. Verily, this Quran guides us towards that which is most upright. The word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the book of guidance, guides us towards a path that leads to our perfection. It also guides us to those individuals who manifested the Holy Quran within their lives, so that they could be a role model for all of us. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. The life of the Holy Prophet is a role model for all of us, for all of those who believe in the Day of Judgment and who believe that they will meet their Lord. Belief in the Day of Judgment is one of the important concepts that we find in Quran repeated over and over. According to some scholars, if you look at the verses of the Holy Quran that talk about the Day of Judgment, you will find that 1/3 of the Holy Quran is talking about the Day of Judgment. Belief, or expecting, even if you don't have belief, fearing that there might be a day of judgment is sometimes enough to stop us from evil deeds. So belief in the hereafter should be strengthened. And we see the Imam on the day of Ashur making a reference to that as well. In lam yakun lakum deen wa la takhafun al-mad. To the enemy soldiers during final moments, doing again, manifesting one of the virtues and one of the principles of the Holy Quran of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi anil Munkar. Even in those final moments when he was on the floor, on the plains of Karbala, and the enemy thinking that he is dead, they decided to go towards the camp. In those final moments, he still did not leave the obligation of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi anil Munkar. When he turned to them and said, In lam yakun lakum deen, O people, if you don't have religion, wala takhafun al-ma'ad, and do not fear the Day of Judgment, fakunu ahraran fi dunyakum, at least be free people in this world. At least be free. The obligation of Nahi anil Munkar that Imam is doing here knows no time boundaries. Even in the final moments of his life, he was performing that duty of Nahi Anil Munkar. He was stopping the enemy soldiers from this munkar. He knew that he could not stop them from other munkarat, but this was one munkar he could stop them from. And this is one of the conditions of Nahi Anil Munkar, that if you know, for example, and this also helps us in the tarbiyat of our children, if a person knows that his child does not pray Fajr and Zuhr, if he was to command them towards both of them, he would not he would not pray either. And if you were to command him towards Asr only or Zuhr only, then he would listen. So then it is wajib to stick to doing only one Amr bil Maruf here. So whatever you know that this part will be effective, you do that. So we see that Imam doing that in the final moments of his life, stopping them from a munkar, and he was able to stop them. It also means that even if those people that you're talking to and you're stopping them from a munkar are not true believers, the Imam might still have the obligation to stop them from evil. So the Imam, throughout his life, throughout this movement, his entire movement was driven by this sacred principle of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi Anil Munkar. Another important manifestation of the Quran, and what I have chosen for these days and for this Ashra were those manifestations that were of prime importance, that were significant, that were instrumental in driving his movement. Second was that the kalimatullahi hiyal uliya, that the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is supreme. The law of Allah is supreme. Kalimatul la ilaha illallah should not be, the sanctity of this kalima should not be violated in any manner. And it was an obligation for him. It is not a tradition which says that whoever does Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy Anil Munkar is a Khalifatullah on the face of earth. This obligation is one of the obligations of the Khalifatullah. And Imam, it was imperative for the Imam to do this obligation of Amr bil Ma'ruf, because it is through Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy Anil Munkar that the Kalimatullah hiyal uliya would be established. The supremacy of the law of Allah cannot be established unless Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy Anil Munkar is performed. So the Imam, we see the Imam doing that. And one of the requirements, if you allow me to say it, of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy Anil Munkar, of Kalimatullahi hiyal uliya, is that you should not be ready to be humiliated at any point in your life. No to humiliation. That was another important principle that was pushing and driving the movement of Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam. And it has its roots in the Holy Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Man kana yuridul izzah, whoever intends and wants, wishes izzah, then who does izzat belong to? فَإِنَّ فَلِلَّهِ الْإِزَّةُ جَمِيعًا. Izzat, all of it belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you want izzah, it belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it will come to you only through obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Imam Hassan alayhi salatu was salam, we say salawat, was in his final moments, and the tradition says in those final moments when one of the companions came to him and saw him in this state where he was coughing and vomiting, and pieces of his liver were coming out of his mouth. In that state, he asked the Imam to advise him, to give him a nasiha. And a nasiyat, a wasiyat, an advice given in that state, would be one of the most important advices that a person could give. We have a list of wasiyats, a list of instructions that the Imam gives to this companion, and one of them, he says, "Iza aratta izzan bila ashiratin." If you want izzah, if you want honor, if you want dignity, bila ashiratin, without the backing of a tribe. Iza aratta izzan bila ashiratin, wa haybatan bila sultanin. And if you want to have haybat, without the backing of a king. If this is what you want, and remember, izzat, and to live a life of honor, and to stay away from humiliation is something that is part of our fitrah. We all want that. We wouldn't have anyone amongst us who would want to live a life of humiliation. But how is that going to happen? How does one get izzah? And how is one humiliated? The essence of humiliation and izzah will happen. It will occur. The essence of it is that you will be honored only if you submit to someone superior than yourself. And you will be humiliated if you submit to someone inferior to yourself. That is why those who respect others for the sake of money have humiliated themselves. Because if you're submitting, if you're respecting someone because of his wealth, then you're not respecting that person, it is the wealth that you're submitting to. It is the wealth that you're prostrating to, which is inferior to you. If fame is what you are. And that is why we have that famous tradition that whoever respects a person because of his wealth has sold 1/3 of its religion. In some certain traditions 2/3, and in certain probably 1/2. Whoever respects someone because of his wealth. These are Islamic values that have changed in our communities over time. One of the problems is that of leaving Amar bil Maruf is that values change. Our definition of who is Sahib Izzat and who is Sahib Zillat in our communities is different than the definition Islam presents. Our definition who is Amir and who is Gharib is different than what Islam considers Imarat and Faqr. There's a beautiful story that one of the persons, a poor man dragged in rags, he entered the Holy Prophet's mosque, and the Holy Prophet was giving a sermon surrounded by his companions. And according to the Islamic tradition, that whenever you walk in a gathering, wherever you find a spot, pick that spot for yourself. Don't pick a special spot. I'm going to sit in front of the member, for example, or in a special spot where I am known and my position gets highlighted. So based on that tradition of Islam, he sat wherever he found a spot, and accidentally it happened to be next to a rich man. When this rich man saw this poor person sitting next to him, dragged in rags, he kind of collected himself. He kind of, apni aba ko sameta. The Holy Prophet happened to witness what he did. The Holy Prophet stopped his sermon, turned to this rich man and said, "Why did you do that?" The purpose of the Holy Prophet was to elevate humanity and relieve them from the shackles that shaitan have enslaved them. And he said, "Why did you do that? This is part of the sermon. Why did you do that?" And when we see that even during the sermon, when Imam Hassan ﷺ or Imam Hussain ﷺ would come, the Holy Prophet would sometimes leave the sermon, leave the member and go to them. This was part of the sermon. This was part of the training he was doing to his ummah, trying to show them the status of these individuals. We see that many times over the life of the Holy Prophet, when this verse, إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. When this verse was revealed, it is said that after this verse, the Holy Prophet stayed alive in Medina for 9 months or 6 months. And every day he would go to the house of his daughter at the time of Fajr Sadiq. And before doing the morning prayers, he would go to the house of the Ahlul Bayt of his daughter and recite this verse. But before reciting this word, he would say, Assalamu alayka ya ahla bayt an-nabuwwa, innama yuridu Allahu li yuzhiba ankum rijsa ahla al-bayt wa yutahhirakum tatheera. Salli ala Muhammadin ya ali. Setting a model, setting an ideal of this is how you should treat this holy household. This is the status. Who is coming at this door? The Holy Prophet. Whose door is this? The door of Ahlul Bayt. Whose message is the Holy Prophet delivering? The message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasul-e-Sadiq at the door of the Sadiqeen, delivering the message of the Asdaq-us-Sadiq. An example for this is how you should treat the Ahlul Bayt after me. So during the khutbah, when the Holy Prophet does something, leaves the khutbah, that is part of the khutbah. He has not stopped the khutbah. His actions, his words are all a hujjat for the Muslims. He stopped his verbal khutbah, turned to him. Why did you do that? He had no reply. The Holy Prophet said, were you afraid that your wealth might slip to him? He said, no, Ya Rasulullah. Were you afraid that his faqr, his poverty might creep into you? He said, no, Ya Rasulullah, I'm sorry. Why did you do that? He had no reply. And in order to compensate for what he had done, he said, oh Ya Rasulullah, I made a mistake, and in order to compensate for what I have done, I am ready to give half of my wealth to this person. I'm ready to give half of my wealth to this person. Everybody was excited and they looked at this person, and the Holy Prophet looked at him and he said, Ya Rasulullah, I don't want his wealth. He is giving, and the others, this was even more surprising for the companions. And they asked him, why are you not taking his wealth? जवाब जो दिया उसने कहा, वो दौलत जिससे पेशानी रिसालत पे बल पड़ जाए, मुझे नहीं चाहिए ऐसी दौलत. I don't need that wealth which brings a frown on the face of the Holy Prophet. I fear that if I get this wealth, I might end up doing the same thing. तो जो अमीर था वो ये शख्स था जिसकी जिंदगी में क़नाअत थी, वो अमीर नहीं था. So wealth, if you, अमीर वो नहीं है जिसके पास बहुत है, या अमीर वो है जिसको जरूरत ना हो, और गरीब वो है जिसको और की जरूरत हो. So if you are running after more and more, you're not wealthy. Wealth and ghina comes from qana'at. Again, to repeat that hadith that I mentioned last year, and it's important that it gets repeated. The Holy Prophet Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, it was revealed to him in Hadith Qudsi. Allah says, I have put 6 things in 6 places. People are finding it elsewhere, and they will never find it. 6 चीजों को हमने 6 जगह पे रखा है, लोग कहीं और ढूंढ रहे हैं, कभी नहीं मिलेगी उनको. Number 1, I have put asaish and comfort in the hereafter. People are looking it in this dunya. They will never find it. Number 2, I have put knowledge in hunger. Ilm ko bhook mein rakha hai. People are looking for it with a full stomach. They will not find it. Number 3, I have put izzat, which is our topic today. हमने इज्जत को अपनी अताअत में रखा है. We have put izzat in my obedience. In other tradition, in other narration, we have put izzat in the vigil of the night, in the night prayers. People are looking for it in the palaces of the kings. They will not find it. Izzat. Look at all of these rulers, Yazid and the rulers of Bani Umayyah. They had palaces, but where are they right now? There is no one to commemorate even a majlis for them. Hussain ﷺ, who was able to maintain his dignity and follow in the line steps of the Holy Prophet and his father and the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, today we see that these gatherings like these are being commemorated all over the world. And Allah gave him so much izzah that even though apparently Yazid was able to kill Imam Hussain on the day of Ashur physically, but after that, till today, until the day of judgment, Imam Hussain kills and slaughters Yazid every moment. उसने एक दफा कत्ल किया इमाम को, लेकिन यजीद हर लम्हे और हर मजलिस में कत्ल होता है. And this will continue to happen till the day of judgment. This is izzat. And that is zillat. Nobody is ready to name their child as Yazid. इससे बड़ी जिल्लत क्या होगी कि कोई नाम, उसकी कब्र का नाम और निशान भी नहीं. And the qabr of Imam Hussain has become the locus of the lovers of the Ahlul Bayt from all over the world. हमने इज्जत को बेदारी शब में रखा. लोग कहाँ ढूंढ रहे हैं? बाद दरबारों में और सलातीन के दरबारों में ढूंढ, नहीं मिलेगी उनको. They will not find it. हमने मुकाम बुलंद को, lofty station, we have put that in tawazu, in humbleness. लोग तकब्बुर में ढूंढ रहे हैं. People are finding it in takabbur. They will not find it. The last two important. हमने इस्तजाबत दुआ को रिस्क हलाल में रखा है. दुआ की कबूलियत को रिस्क हलाल में रखा है. लोग शोर व गुल में ढूंढ रहे हैं. We think if we pray to Allah with a loud voice and we scream and we cry, our prayer, Allah will hear our prayers. This tradition is saying your prayers will be accepted if you have rizq halal in your stomach. Karbala is an institution. You find examples of all of these ma'arif, all of these virtues and values of Islam in Karbala. Even on the day of Ashur, when Imam Hussain ﷺ wanted to admonish the enemy, he went to the battlefield and advised them. They didn't want to listen. Imam asked Umar Syed to order his soldiers to be silent. They were silent. Then he asked him, ask your animals, the horses and the camels, to become silent. He said, I don't have control over them. Then the Imam, out of his miraculous wilayat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him, silenced all the animals as well. It is said that even the bells that were in the necks of the camels and the horses, they also silenced. Pin drop silence. And Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam, after praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Holy Prophet, advised them, told them who he was and what his relationship with his grandfather was. This is the majlis that Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam was reciting on the day of Ashura himself, starting with Hamdu Sana of Allah. That is what we do. Followed by his fazail, his relationship with the Holy Prophet, and his status before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the fazail of. And then he advised them, warning them against this dunya and how this dunya is disloyal and it will deceive them. That is nasihat and mu'izah, that is part of every majlis that we perform. That is what happens. And then at the end, he warns them against the consequences of their actions. And then he lifted that miraculous silence that he had instilled over them to see if there had been any effect on them. They started to make a hue and cry and loud noises. There was no effect on them. He tried this one more time. Nothing happened. There was no response. In the finally, when he lifted that siege of silence that he had put over them, one of the enemy soldiers stepped forward with a stone in his hand and he hurled the stone towards the Imam, which hit the Imam on his forehead, and the Imam, it started to bleed. The Imam returned back to the camps, asked everybody to stay inside. Only Hazrat Zainab was allowed to come outside. When she looked at Imam Hussain, She started to cry. Did you not introduce yourself? Did you not tell them who you were? The Imam cried that day. He said, I did. Crying, he said, but what can I do? مُلِعَتْ بُطُونُهُمْ مِنَ الْحَرَامِ. Their stomachs are full of haram. If the stomachs are full of haram, and Imam Hussain is the one who is admonishing, even the admonishing of Imam Hussain will not have any effect on an individual. This is the effect of rizq-e-haram on our actions. Dua, istajabat dua ko rizq-e-haram mein rakha, rizq-e-halal mein rakha, log saro sada mein dhoond rahe hain. Aur qanaat ko, ghina ko qanaat mein rakha hai. People are finding it in the abundance of wealth. If you want to be ghani, it is qanaat that you need to exercise. That is what will result in ghina. Sometimes we want to become ghani. We don't want to be poor. But we resort to mechanisms that accelerate poverty and make us poor even before poverty was to come to us. And we do a lot of, and the same goes with zillat. Sometimes out of the fear of zillat, we do things that we humiliate ourselves before we get humiliated. Let me give an example, and this is from Amirul Mu'mineen in Nahjul Balagha. Please recite a salawat. Amirul Mu'mineen says, Ajibtu lil bakhil. I am surprised at the bakhil person. Yasta'jilul faqr alladhi minhu harab. He brings over him the poverty that he wants to run away from. Ajibtu lil bakhil yasta'jilul faqr alladhi minhu harab wa yafutuhu al-ghina alladhi iyyahu talab. And he gets rid of the ghina that he wants. I'm surprised at that person who, because he fears that he would become poor even though he has wealth, but he is not spending it on himself. So imagine if you have wealth but you're saving it in the bank and you're not spending it on yourself, what will happen? You will live like a poor person. And he says, فَيَعِيشُ فِي الدُّنْيَا عَيْشَ الْفُقَرَاءِ. This person lives in this dunya like the lives of a poor person. وَيُحَاسَبُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ Hisab al-aghniya. This person, even though he had wealth, he lived in this dunya as a poor person, and on the day of judgment, he will be accountable and he will be taken into account the accountability of a ghani person. This is khusran fi dunya wal akhirah. And then he says, this is interesting, this is what was relevant to our discussion, but saying of the Imam, so I'll continue. He says, Ajibtu lil mutakabbir. I'm surprised at the person who does takabbur. Kana bil amse nutfa. He was a sperm yesterday, which people tested. Wa yakuno ghadan jeef. And he will become a corpse tomorrow. How can he be proud of himself? What are you? Look at your past and look at what you will eventually become. How can you exercise takabbur? Then he says, Ajibtu liman shakka fillah. I'm surprised at the person who has doubts regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wa huwa yara khalq Allah, and then he sees the makhluk of Allah. You see the signs of Allah and then yet you doubt the existence of Allah. I'm surprised at that person. Ajibtu liman nasiyal maut. I am surprised at the person who has forgotten death, yet he sees people die every day. I'm surprised. Wa ajibtu liman ankara nash'atal ukhra. And I'm surprised the person who has forgotten the day of judgment, the second rising, while they see the first rising. They see the first people being born and then they do not, or they're in doubt regarding the resurrection. In the last he says, Ajibtu li'amirin darul fana. I am surprised at the person who builds the darul fana, and has forgotten the Darul Baqa. Who builds a house in this world but pays no attention on building the house in the Darul Baqa. So a person who is afraid of bukhl will accelerate, who is afraid of faqr will accelerate faqr on himself through his bukhl, because his fear of getting poor, he will not spend and he will start living a life of poverty. The same happens with zillat. There are 2 or 3 main sources, reasons why zillat comes upon a person. One of it is the love of this dunya. If you love this dunya, if you are greedy, that will happen. And the third reason, an important reason, is the fear of being humiliated. We have that story of Abdullah ibn Umar. He did not do bay'ah of Amirul Mu'mineen in the time of Amirul Mu'mineen, saying that you have fought or you're fighting against the Ahlul Kitab, you're fighting against the Ahlul Qibla, you're fighting against those who pray. I am in doubt regarding your imamat. This person, a time came when Hajjaj ibn Yusuf was the ruler and he was instructing very severe punishable rulings for those who did not submit. Fearing himself of being humiliated, he wanted to do the bay'ah of this ruler. And he went at night time to the door of his palace, and the guards did not let him in, and he pleaded, I have a very important matter to discuss. And eventually they let him in, and this person, Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, was sleeping, was in his bed, and he said, I have a very important matter to discuss. He said, what matter? He said, I want to do bay'ah to you. He said, couldn't you have come in the morning? He said, I feared if I died during the night, what answer would I give Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who says, Man mata walam ya'rif imama zamanihi. If I died without an imam, what would happen to me? Humiliating himself when you leave the imam-e-haq. You can get to a state and you want to do the bay'ah of imam-e-batil. That person, he said, well, I am sleeping right now, and if you really want to save yourself, then do bay'ah on my foot. And he extended his foot or his toe out of the blanket, and he did bay'ah on his foot, kissing his toe. He left, fearing humiliation. This is what can happen. And one of the Sunni Mufassirin gave a very important comment when he was discussing that whenever the prophets came to their nations, one of the reasons that they would not accept them, they would say, he is a bashar like us. How can we submit to a bashar who is like us? And he makes an interesting comment. He says, even though based on our aqidah, the holy prophets, the prophets of Allah were humans, but they were humans on whom Wahi revealed, and that is one of the major differences between us and our prophets. They were the recipients of divine revelation, and whatever it takes, whatever tools and whatever qualities a human needs to receive Wahi, they were blessed with that. And we are not. And that is why we cannot receive revelation. So they were special, but they were humans. Those individuals who did not want to submit before individuals like themselves, how could they end up submitting and taking stones as their gods? A very interesting point. If you do not submit to the divine representative, this is what will happen. Look at the story of Habil and Qabil. Qabil, who turned away from the teachings of his father, and he did not want to be taught by the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Eventually he had to take instructions from a crow. He had to learn things from an animal. So if you leave the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his teachings and the divine representatives of the Imams, this is eventually what is going to happen with those who do that. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So, no to humiliation. Hayhat min dhillah. The love of this dunya, following the ta'ud, not doing amar bil maruf and nahi anil munkar. There's a beautiful story attributed to Hazrat Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. Hazrat Isa alayhi salatu wasalam was traveling with some of his companions, and they reached a place where they reached a village where there were a lot of decomposed bodies. And Hazrat Isa turned to his companions and said that they were afflicted with universal azab, and there was an azab that came on all of them. Because had it been gradual, those who were alive would have buried the dead. Because there are corpses lying around and they're all decomposed. It was an azab that came on all of them. And that is why they died. One of the companions said, why don't you raise one of them back to life and ask them what happened to them? The Prophet Isa accepted his request, and he greeted them and asked them to come back to life. One of them woke up and he greeted the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet asked him, what resulted in the azab on coming on this nation? Why was this nation punished by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He said, O Prophet of Allah, we woke up in the morning all fine, but then that very night when we slept, we found ourselves in Hawiyah. And he asked, so what is Hawiyah? He said, it is an ocean of fire within which is a mountain of fire. And the Prophet asked, what did you used to do? Why did this happen? He said, Hubbud dunya wa ibadatut taghut. Love of the dunya and the worship of taghut. And the Prophet asked, how severe was your attachment to this dunya? He said, we loved this dunya just like a baby would love the source of milk. That is how excited we were when we got to this dunya, and we were upset in the same manner when a child is removed from the source of milk. And then the Prophet asked, and what level of ibadat did you do of the taghut? And he said, to the extent that we would follow whatever command he would give. And then he asked another interesting question. He said, why did only you among all of them woke up? Why did others not wake up? He said, and this is also in accordance with what we have been talking over the past few days. He said, it is because all of them were involved and engaged in this sin. And on the punishment that they're getting, their mouths have been zipped up with fire. And they cannot talk. So how come you were able to talk? He said, I was a mu'min amongst them. And I did not do any of these things. But in parenthesis, but I did not do nahi anil munkar. I did not stop them. And therefore, that is why I have been afflicted with the punishment that came on them. And in the hereafter, I am tied down with the hair, with a very thin rope, and I'm hanging in this ocean of fire. And every moment I fear that this rope will break and I will fall in this ocean. So ignoring this duty of Amr bil Maruf, and Amr bil Maruf is such an important responsibility, it was imperative that the Imam take on this responsibility. Hubbud dunya, another reason. Not humiliating oneself. Imam was not ready to humiliate himself in any way. During the time of Muawiyah, He did not humiliate himself for a moment, and not after he died. Right from day one, when the letter to Walid came, look at the stance that the Imam took, the way he responded, did not humiliate. When he was leaving Medina, people advised him, take a secret route. Take a secret route. Leave this Medina in secrecy. He said, no, I will not fly like a runaway slave. I will leave in front of everybody. I will not be humiliated. And he left in front of everybody. Nobody could stop him. On the day of Judgment, on the day of Ashur, he said the statement, La wallahi, addressing the enemies, La wallahi, la utikum biyadi. I'm not to give you, I will never give my hand to you. In which manner? Ayata az-zali, like a humiliated person. Wala ufirru firar al-abid, neither will I run away from you like a slave. He will stand up and fight and defend my values. Imam Hussain was not ready to defend, was not ready to humiliate himself in any manner. And that is what he expects from all of us. There's a tradition which says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not allowed a moment in any circumstance to humiliate himself. Humiliation is not allowed. Yes, we find one tradition where we find this humiliation that is allowed. Amir al-Mu'minin says, please recite the salawat. Says, whoever is not ready to taste the humiliation of learning something, whoever is not ready to bear the humiliation of education, when you learn from someone, you have to humiliate yourself. You have to sit before someone and respect that and honor that person. If a person is not ready to bear the humiliation of ta'lim and ta'allum, he should be ready for a moment or for a little amount of time. He should be ready to bear humiliation for eternity. The humiliation of ignorance for eternity. जो इल्म के लिए अब जिल्लत बर्दाश्त करने के लिए तैयार नहीं है, हुसूल इल्म के लिए वो जहालत की जिल्लत को अबद बर्दाश्त करने के लिए तैयार रहे. So he was not ready. We are not. Innal izza lillahi. Izzat belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of it. I'm not going to give you my hand in humiliation. Neither will I run away from you. Another statement, Inna da'i ibn da'i, this person addressing Ibn Ziyad, qad rakaza bayna snatayn, he has given me only two options. He has put me on a road which has two options, bayna sillate wa zillah, between the sword and humiliation. Wa hayhat min zillah, and zillat is away from us. The Ahlul Bayt did not submit to humiliation for a single moment of their life. And the tradition says that a moment of humiliation is not worth eternity of izzah. Ek lahze ki humiliation cannot be compared with izzat over dahar, izzat of dahar, of time, timeless izzat. This humiliation is not worth it. That is why we see Imam, no matter how hard the situation got in Karbala, he was not ready to humiliate himself. Never. Not even on the final moments. Not even when Ali Akbar ﷺ came for the final farewell. When he came to seek permission to go to the battlefield. He was not broken by that. Yes, being a father, he loved his child. This love, fatherly love for a child, is part of human nature. And it's a virtue. And the Imams have all human virtues to the most highest level. So he loved his child more than I love my child, more than you love your child. And when your child leaves for a great cause, you will cry over the separation. So having this virtue of love is not condemned as long as it does not interfere with your divine obligation to allow him to enter the battlefield. When Ali Akbar came for this final and sought the permission to enter the battlefield, the Imam did not stop him. He was happy that his son has this ma'rifah, that he is ready to sacrifice himself defending his Imam and the religion of Allah. So immediately gave him permission, but asked him to go and seek farewell from his aunts and sisters. جاؤ بہنوں اور پھوپھیوں سے بھی خدا حافظی کر لو. جناب علی اکبر خیمے میں آتے ہیں. خیمے میں ایک کوہرام بپا ہے. راوی کہتا ہے کہ میں خیمے کے باہر سے دیکھ رہا تھا. دشمن کی فوج کا راوی ہے. کہتا ہے میں دور سے دیکھ رہا تھا. کبھی خیمے کا پردہ اٹھتا تھا, کبھی گر جاتا تھا, پھر اٹھتا تھا, پھر گر جاتا تھا, جس سے میں سمجھ گیا کہ جناب علی اکبر نکلنا چاہتے ہیں تو پردہ اٹھ جاتا ہے, بیبیاں لپٹ جاتی ہیں تو پردہ گر جاتا ہے. کس انداز میں خیمے سے نکلے ہوں گے خدا جانتا ہے. یہ وہ شخصیت ہے جو شبیہ پیغمبر تھا, جس کے بارے میں کہا جاتا ہے کہ صورت میں, سیرت میں, نطق میں رسول کے مشابہ تھے. وہ لوگ جنہوں نے رسول خدا کو اپنی زندگی میں سنا تھا, اگر دیوار کے پیچھے سے علی اکبر کلام کرتے تو ان کو لگتا تھا کہ رسول خدا کلام کر رہے ہیں. یہ وہ شخصیت ہے رخصت آخر کے لیے خیموں سے نکل رہی ہے. خدا جانے کس حالت میں خیمے سے نکلے ہوں گے. اسی حالت میں جس حالت میں ایک بھرے گھر سے جنازہ نکلتا ہے, بھرے گھر سے جنازہ نکلتا ہے, اپنے باپ کے پاس آئے ہوں گے, خدا حافظی کی ہوگی. خدا حافظی کرنے کے بعد جناب علی اکبر میدان جنگ کی طرف جا رہے ہیں. ایک عظیم وقت ہے اور ایک عظیم غم کا منظر بھی تھا کہ پورے عالم کا غم سمٹ کر میرے مولا کے دل میں آ گیا. ایسی حالت میں انسان کو اپنا دل ہلکا کرنے کے لیے کسی سے کلام کرنا ہوتا ہے, کسی پیارے سے گفتگو کرنا ہوتی ہے, لیکن حسین کس سے گفتگو کریں؟ حسین کے پاس کون ہے جس سے گفتگو کریں؟ بہترین گفتگو کرنے کے لیے جو ذات موجود ہے وہ خدا کی ذات ہے. ایک مرتبہ میرے مولا نے خدا کو مخاطب ہو کر فرمایا, اللہم اشہد علی ہؤلاء القوم, اے بار الہ تو گواہ رہنا کہ اس قوم کی طرف وہ جوان جا رہا ہے جو صورت میں, جو سیرت میں, جو نطق میں تیرے رسول کے مشابہ ہے. اس طرح سے اپنے دل کو ہلکا کیا. پھر عمر سعد کو مخاطب ہو کر کہا کہ عمر سعد قطع اللہ رحمک کما قطعت رحمی, جس طرح تو نے میری نسل کو ختم کیا خدا تیری نسل کو ختم کرے. میرے امام حسین نے اپنے فرزند کو خدا حافظی کی. میرے جناب علی اکبر میدان کربلا میں آئے, اتنا تعارف کرایا, انا علی ابن الحسین ابن علی, میں علی ابن حسین ابن علی ہوں. نحن و بیت اللہ اولا بالنبی, ہمارا خاندان خانہ کعبہ کی قسم نبی کے زیادہ قریب ہے اس ظالم لوگوں سے جن کی تم اطاعت کر رہے ہو. رجس پڑھا اور اس کے بعد جنگ شروع ہوئی. جناب علی اکبر ایک ایک کر کے دشمنوں کو فنار کر رہے ہیں. بہت دیر گزر گئی اور جنگ میں جناب علی اکبر حملہ کرتے جا رہے ہیں, دشمنوں کو فنار کرتے جا رہے ہیں کہ ایک مرتبہ مقتل نے لکھا کہ جناب علی اکبر پلٹ کر خیمے میں آئے ہیں. ایک رشید جوان, ایک عاقل جوان سمجھدار ہے, واپس آ کر جو بات کی ہے, جو نقل ہوا ہے مقتل میں, آ کر جو جملہ کہا کہ اے بابا جان, العطش قد قتلنی, یہ پیاس مجھے قتل کر رہی ہے, یہ آرمر, یہ زرہ جو پہنی ہے یہ میرے لیے سنگین ہو گئی ہے. کیا خیمے میں پانی موجود ہے؟ کیا ایک گھونٹ پانی مل سکتا ہے؟ میرا سوال یہ ہے کہ علی اکبر جیسا جوان بیٹا, علی اکبر جیسا رشید بیٹا, کیا جانتے نہ تھے خیمے میں پانی نہیں ہے؟ کیوں پلٹ کر آئے اور بابا سے ایسا مشکل سوال کیا کہ ان کے بابا اس سوال کو پورا نہ کر سکے؟ اس کا شاید جواب یہ ہو کہ جب بڑھ بڑھ کر حملہ کر رہے تھے سمجھ گئے کہ میرے باپ آپ کی دست نظر کرم میرے اوپر ہے، دست امامت میرے اوپر ہے. اگر میرے بابا نے دست امامت میرے اوپر رکھا تو میں شہادت کی منزل پر فائز نہ ہو پاؤں گا. پلٹ کر آئے ہیں اپنے بابا کے پاس، بابا جان آپ کا دست امامت میرے اوپر ہے، جب تک میں آپ کے دست امامت کے حصار میں ہوں جنگ کرتا رہوں گا لیکن شہادت نصیب نہیں ہوگی. اگر آپ نے دست امامت کے حصار میں مجھے رکھنا ہے تو کم سے کم پانی کا ایک گھونٹ پلا دیجئے تاکہ میں جنگ کو جاری رکھ سکوں. گویا جناب علی اکبر کو پہلے اذن جہاد ملا تھا، اذن شہادت نہیں ملی تھی. پلٹ کر آئے ہیں کہ بابا جان اذن جہاد تو دے دیا، اب اذن شہادت بھی دے دیجئے. میرے امام نے اس جملے سے اذن شہادت دی یہ کہتے ہوئے کہ جاؤ علی اکبر، میرے جد تم کو سیراب کریں گے، جلد تم میرے جد کے ہاتھوں سیراب ہوگے. یہ اذن شہادت تھا جو جناب علی اکبر کو مل گیا. میدان جنگ میں گئے ہیں، دشمن سے دوبارہ جنگ شروع کی، جانتے ہیں کہ اب شہید ہو جائیں گے. ایک ضرب جو میرے امام میرے مولا علی عباس کے سر پر لگی ہے، آپ زخمی ہو گئے، زخموں سے چور ہو گئے. جانتے ہیں اب جنگ کو ادامے جنگ کو کنٹینیو نہیں کر سکتے، چاہتے ہیں کہ اپنے بدن کو زندہ سلامت اپنے بابا کے پاس لے جائیں. ایسا نہ ہو کہ بوڑھے باپ کو جوان بیٹے کی لاش پہ آنا پڑے. اپنے بابا کو دیکھ رہے ہیں، صبح سے جنازے اٹھا رہے ہیں، میرا بوڑھا باپ میرے جنازے پہ کس طرح سے آئے گا، کس طرح سے پہنچے گا. اس زمانے کا یہ طریقہ ہوا کرتا تھا کہ جب گھوڑ سوار اپنے ہاتھوں کو گھوڑے کے گردن کے گرد گرد لپیٹ لیا کرتا تھا تو گھوڑا سمجھ جاتا تھا کہ سوار اب جنگ کے قابل نہیں رہا. وہ اپنے سوار کو دشمن کے نرغے سے نکال کر واپس اپنے خیموں کی طرف لے جاتا تھا. جناب علی اکبر نے اپنے باہوں کو گھوڑے کے گلے میں ڈال دیا کہ مجھے واپس خیمے کی طرف لے جا. اب خدا جانے کیا ہوا، شاید گھوڑے پر بھی پیاس کی شدت کا غلبہ تھا. گھوڑا سمجھ نہیں سکا کہ خیمے اس طرف ہیں یا اس طرف ہیں. خیام حسینی کی طرف جانے کی بجائے گھوڑا خیام یزیدی کی طرف چل پڑا. اب جناب علی اکبر دشمنوں کے نرغے میں آ گئے. جس کے پاس خنجر ہے وہ خنجر چلا رہا ہے، جس کے پاس تیر ہے وہ تیر چلا رہا ہے. جب جناب علی اکبر گھوڑے سے زمین پر گرے ہیں، اپنے بابا کو بلایا نہیں، یہ نہیں کہا یا ابتی ادرکنی، بلایا نہیں، بس یہ کہا السلام علیکہ، علیکہ منی سلام یا ابتی، میرے بابا میرا آخری سلام ہو. گویا یہ کہہ رہے ہیں بابا میرے جنازے پہ آنے کی ضرورت نہیں. کہا ذا جدی یقرؤک سلام، میں آپ کے میرے جد میرے پاس موجود ہے، آپ پر بھی سلام کر رہے ہیں، آپ کے منتظر ہیں. گویا کہہ رہے ہو کہ بابا میرے جنازے پر آنے کی زحمت نہ کیجئے گا. لیکن باپ جوان بوڑھا باپ ہے، جوان بیٹے کا جنازہ ہے، کیسے ہو سکتا ہے کہ حسین جوان بیٹے کے جنازے پر نہ پہنچے. حسین خیمے سے نکلے، ادھر سے زینب خیمے سے نکلی. اب حسین نکلے اپنے بیٹے کو پکارتے ہوئے، یا بنیا یا بنیا للدنیا بعدک العفا، تیرے بعد جینے پر خاک. لیکن جب جناب زینب نکلی ہیں تو یہ صدا بلند کرتی ہوئی اے میرے بھیا، اے میرے بھتیجے، دونوں کا نوحہ بلند کر رہی ہیں. اور اس سے پہلے کہ علی اکبر کے جنازے پر حسین پہنچتے، ثانیہ زہرا اس جنازے پر پہنچی، اپنے آپ کو علی اکبر کے اوپر گرا دیا تاکہ جب حسین پہنچے تو نگاہ علی اکبر کے جنازے پر نہ پڑے، ثانیہ زہرا پر پڑے. لعنت اللہ علی القوم الظالمین. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept this majlis and to accept the hajat of all the mu'mineen who are in this majlis. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are able to benefit from the teachings of Imam Hussain and from his movement, and we live our lives according to the wishes of the 12th Imam. We pray for the hasty appearance of the 12th Imam, and we pray that ourselves and our children end up being the helpers of our 12th Imam, Matabe Hussain.
شبیہ سرور واوہرو علی اکبر ذبیح کربل شبیہ سرور واوہرو علی اکبر ذبیح کربل شبیہ سرور واوہرو علی اکبر. Everyone. ذبیح کربل
شبیہ سرور واوہرو علی
اکبر ذبیح
کربل شبیہ سرور واوہرو علی اکبر.
In every Ashura Muharram forum Layla wa matam forum Layla wa matam forum Layla wa matam O bibi shayo azim noha O bibi shayo azim noha Yo dastane Ali Akbar ذبیح
کربل شبیہ سرور واوہرو علی اکبر ذبیح کربل شبیہ سرور واوہرو علی اکبر.
Oh, can you hear La ilaha illa the call of Akbar by idhn Mawla The call of Akbar by idhn Mawla The call of Akbar by idhn Mawla Reverberating in every era Reverberating in every era Is that Adhan-e Ali Akbar
ذبیح کربل شبیہ سرور واوہرو علی
Everyone
ذبیح کربل شبیہ سرور واوہرو علی اکبر.
Hussain says Ya Ali taqaddam Oh my beloved Shabih Khatam Oh my beloved Shabih Khatam Fida upon you O Ibn Zahra Fida upon you O Ibn Zahra Hazar Jane Ali Akbar
ذبیح کربل شبیہ سرور
Everyone
واوہرو علی اکبر ذبیح کربل شبیہ سرور واوہرو علی اکبر.
Alayka minni salam Baba This is the farewell kalam Baba This is the farewell kalam Baba This is the farewell kalam Baba For we are reaching the culmination For we are reaching the culmination Of Imtihan-e Ali Akbar ذبیح
کربل شبیہ سرور واوہرو علی اکبر ذبیح کربل شبیہ سرور واوہرو علی اکبر.
Hussain whispers in affirmation You have accomplished your destination You have accomplished your destination but never ending for Ibn Zahra, but never ending for Ibn Zahra. Is imtihan-e Ali Akbar, but never ending for Layla. Is imtihan-e Ali Akbar. Zabih Karbal Shabih Sarwar Roa Wahero Ali. Everyone, Zabih Karbal Shabih Sarwar
Roa Wahero Ali Akbar.
Oh, our Mawla, you carried Akbar, a feat greater than Fateh Khaybar, a feat greater than Fateh Khaybar. Hussain still has to bury Asghar, Hussain still has to bury Asghar. Oh no, Khane Ali Akbar, Zabih Karbal Shabih Sarwar, oh Wahero Ali. Everyone, Zabih Karbal Shabih Sarwar, oh Wahero Ali Akbar. They violated the Psalm of David, the youth of Yusuf, the face of Ahmad, the youth of Yusuf, the face of Ahmad. Oh, what a disgrace for the Ummah, oh, what a disgrace for the Ummah. وقاتلان علي أكبر ذبيح كربل شبيه سرور وهيرو علي أكبر ذبيح كربل
شبيه سرور وهيرو علي أكبر.
He is a model and inspiration for every conscience in every nation, for every conscience in every nation. So come together today to enter, so come together today to enter the Karwan-e Ali Akbar. So come together today to enter the Karwan-e Ali Akbar. Zabih Karbal Shabih Sarwar, oh Wahero Ali. Everyone, Zabih Karbal Shabih Sarwar, oh Wahero Ali Akbar. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Mu'mineen, please remain seated. We will have a 10-minute question and answer session. Those of you who know, you can enter your questions on slido.com, enter the code Muharram 2022. Otherwise, we can also take questions from the floor. Moulana, and over to you.
Take the questions from the audience. You begin with that, inshallah. Yeah, there's a question. Can the mic be delivered? Wa alaikum assalam.
I want to ask about the difference between Kalimatullah and La Ilaha Illallah.
And what?
La Ilaha Illallah.
La hukma illa lillah. La hukma illa lillah was a slogan that was raised by the Khawarij, and it was pertaining to that, the masala of hakamiyat that they decided, that they agreed upon, and in that construct, la hukma illa lillah. But at a basic level, la hukma illa lillah is a manifestation of kalimatullahi hiyal uliya. It is one of the manifestations of that same basic grand principle. Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask, there is a conflict in the Islamic community over two incidents. One incident is the signature or treaty of peace between Imam Hussain and Muawiyah. Definitely for the Shiite part of Islam, Muawiyah was at error and he was allowed to govern by Imam Hussain. Whereas Imam Hussain gave up his life fighting against a wrong cause. So where do you see the common in both actions?
Yeah, very good question. We see two Imams using different strategies for a similar goal. So as times and circumstances change, the strategies change. It was not that Imam Hussain ﷺ was a warrior and Imam Hassan ﷺ was a peace-loving individual, because one big example, one big evidence of that is that Imam Hussain himself lived under the rule of Muawiyah for 10 years. And in that 10 years, he apparently respected the treaty that his brother had signed. And he was getting letters from people in Kufa asking to come over and they're ready for an uprising. But he wrote back saying that this is not the right time. If Imam Hussain ﷺ was in Imam Hassan's shoes, he would have done the same. The circumstances were such that if Imam Hussain ﷺ had risen, or if Imam Hassan had risen at that time, it would have resulted in the martyrdom of all of his followers, and that movement would be suppressed in such a way that it would not bear any fruit. So the circumstances dictated that a certain strategy be used in that time and a different strategy be used in the time of Imam Hussain. There is one question. In a married life, the husband is the head of family, but does it give him the right to humiliate his kids and wife by ignoring their rights over his mother? No, nobody has the right to humiliate anyone by trampling on their rights. A man is the head of the household, and Allah has given him wilayat over his family, but that wilayat that authority has been given to him to test him. So he has responsibilities towards his mother, and he has responsibilities towards his wife and towards his children. And it is the delicate balance that he has to strike, which is expected of him. He will not be forgiven if he violates the rights of the wife. He will not be forgiven if he violates the rights of the mother. And he will not be forgiven if he is indifferent to the needs and the rights of the children. So he has to strike that balance. And each party needs to understand, the mother needs to understand, the husband has to attend to his wife as well, she has rights, and the wife needs to understand that the mother has her rights and my husband needs to give her time and look after her as well. If there are no, yes, one last question, inshallah. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
My question is, what is the obligation of mu'minin or women while the Imam is in prayer? We see that I think Tawhut has taken over the world. And should we sit down and wait for the uprising after the zuhur of Imam?
We need to prepare ourselves to be ready to further the cause when the Imam comes. So we need to be ready. It's just like when you have invited a guest and you are waiting for him. How do you wait for him? Do you start cooking when he comes? Or you start the cooking before he actually comes? You're preparing, you have the home is ready, the home is clean, the tables are set, the dishes are there, you're waiting for him to come. So whatever is in our capacity, we need to make an effort for him to repair, and so that we can support him. If we are going to cleanse ourselves from the vices that we have, then we would not be able to be on his side when he comes. There is a big lesson to learn from the story of Karbala. If we have not cleansed ourselves, our souls, and we have not cultivated the virtues, if we still love the dunya, if we still perform injustice over our family, over our neighbors, over our Muslim brothers, over the community, how can we be part to the movement of the final Imam who will return to establish justice over the entire world? we will be standing against him. Right? If we are, I'll finish with this note. When I first came back from the West, and people asked me, so how did you find West? And I said, well, there is to a certain extent implementation of the law, and you don't necessarily need sefarish and to talk to people and to get things done. They have a basic working system that we don't have here, and you can get most of the things done through a phone call and things like that. And he used to work in a police department here. And he said, well, that's a very dangerous place to live. That was his comment, because he was used to relations, developing networks and getting things done through networks. And for him to live in that society where networks will suddenly stop to exist and you will be treated on merit was a very dangerous thing. So if we are of that mindset, and when the Imam comes, we need to realize, we need to ask ourselves, which side will we be standing? Are we working towards the establishment of merit and getting on merit right now, or we like the status quo to continue? So that will define where we are. So we have a responsibility in the time of ghaibat to prepare ourselves. Okay, next question, inshallah.
Some of our Muslim brothers who believe that Jadid was only the person, was the sole person behind the whole event, and his father has nothing to do with it. So is there any connection of this event with his father, or like they considered it as sacred and some of the Sahaba? So what's the reality behind that? That's my question.
It is simple, it is easy for them to look at the history, look at the peace treaty, look at the conditions of the peace treaty, and study a little bit of history, and things will become clear. I will leave everybody on their individual judgment to look at history alone and not look at and read history. An important point one of my Sunni friends told me, he said we should read history by deleting the alayhi salam and the raziyallahu anhu. Read history without those alqabat, and then read it the second time and put those alqabat yourselves. And if you do that, haqq and batil will become clear. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali. One question from a sister. Let's take that one question from a sister. We were not able to. Apologize for the delay. Wa alaikum assalam. Not to the Imam, to a ruler, a Taghut ruler. It was not to the Imam. It was to a Taghut ruler, Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, and he was afraid, and he thought that if I don't do bay'ah, something's going to happen to me. So he was in a rush, and he wanted to please the king by going and doing bay'ah at all costs. And he humiliated himself further by doing so. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Assalamu alayka ya Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bi finaik alaykum minni jami'an salamullahi abada ma baqitu wa baqiya al-layl wa an-nahar wa la ja'alahu Allah akhir al-'ahd minni li ziyaratikum every day. Assalamu ala al-Hussain wa ala Ali ibn al-Hussain wa ala awlad al-Hussain وعلى أصحاب الحسين السلام عليكم وعلى جدك وأبيك وعلى أمك وأخيك وعلى 9